In January 2015, Donetsk International Airport was no longer an airport. The new terminal, a symbol of modern Ukraine, had collapsed into a skeletal ruin. The runway, once a smooth expanse of asphalt, was a cratered moonscape, its surface pulverized by an endless barrage of artillery and tank shells. Every square meter of concrete and steel had been systematically churned, shattered, and rent asunder. Yet, within this smoldering labyrinth of rubble, a small contingent of Ukrainian soldiers continued to hold their ground. They had earned an unofficial, almost mythical name from their adversaries, the Cyborgs, a title born from their seemingly indestructible resilience. But the fundamental question remains: why did an airport, rendered completely useless from a military aviation standpoint, become the most ferocious and blood-soaked epicenter of the conflict in Donbass? By the summer of 2014, the city of Donetsk had solidified its position as the nerve center for pro-Russian separatist forces. In response, the Ukrainian military initiated a campaign to encircle the city, seeking to establish and hold key strategic positions around its perimeter. The primary objective was to isolate the separatist stronghold, preventing it from becoming a stable and functional capital. In this high-stakes geopolitical chess match, Donetsk Airport, situated just a few kilometers from the city center, abruptly transformed from a civilian hub into the most critical forward outpost in the entire region. The side that controlled the airport possessed a decisive advantage. They could project and direct firepower around Donetsk, possessed an unparalleled vantage point for observation and reconnaissance, held a potent political symbol of sovereignty and control. This reality was not lost on either of the contending forces. The strategic value of the airport quickly became a paradox, a place where symbolism began to overshadow its purely functional military purpose. In theory, the facility was defunct. The runway was so thoroughly destroyed that it could not accommodate any aircraft, making aerial reinforcement or supply impossible. The logistics of sustaining a garrison in such a contested and exposed location were a nightmare, constant high-risk endeavor. However, the tactical advantages it offered were undeniable. The new terminal, despite its ruined state, still possessed high-rise structures that served as ideal observation posts and sniper nests, granting defenders a commanding view of the surrounding terrain. Below ground, a network of technical areas, basements, and Soviet-era bunkers provided a deep and resilient defensive infrastructure. Furthermore, the open, flat expanse of the airfield itself was a perfect killing field for defenders to call in coordinated artillery support against any advancing ground forces. But most importantly, the continued presence of the Ukrainian flag flying over the airport, right on the doorstep of the separatist capital, was a powerful and defiant symbol of Kyiv's authority. For the separatists and their backers in Moscow, this was an unacceptable affront that had to be extinguished at any cost. To defend this crucial position, the Ukrainian side implemented a rotational deployment system, cycling through some of its most elite and battle-hardened units. The 79th Airmobile Brigade, the 95th Air Assault Brigade, and the 93rd Mechanized Brigade formed the core of the defense, augmented by various Special Forces detachments and National Guard battalions. At any given time, the regular defensive force holding the vast complex numbered only a few hundred men. Facing them was a formidable array of opposing forces. The primary assault was led by the separatist Donetsk People's Republic DPR militia, heavily supported by specialized units, tank columns, and a near-constant barrage from massed artillery. Later reports and evidence would point to the direct involvement of regular Russian military units in the offensive operations. The disparity in firepower was immense, with the attacking side holding an overwhelming advantage in heavy weaponry. Despite this, the airport's defenses did not crumble. From May 2014 through the brutal winter and into early 2015, Donetsk Airport devolved into a relentless 242-day meat grinder. The fighting was characterized by a level of sustained ferocity that shocked even seasoned combat veterans. Each day was a cycle of destruction. The complex was subjected to continuous, indiscriminate shelling from artillery, mortars, and Grad rocket systems. The fighting was not a matter of front lines, but of individual rooms and corridors. Vicious close-quarters combat erupted in the shattered hallways of the terminal buildings, with floors and sections being lost and reclaimed in a dizzying and deadly rhythm. The front line ceased to exist. There were only contested walls, individual staircases, and piles of debris that served as makeshift fortifications. Ukraine struggled to reinforce its besieged garrison with small, armored convoys that had to run a deadly gauntlet of constant artillery fire to reach the terminals. Many of the defending units could only endure the hellish conditions for a few days before being rotated out. Utterly exhausted, yet despite the horrific attrition rate and the overwhelming pressure, the spirit of the defense did not collapse. As 2014 drew to a close, the attacking forces, frustrated by their inability to dislodge the defenders through infantry assaults, fundamentally altered their tactics. The objective shifted from capturing the airport room by room to simply annihilating it entirely. The new strategy relied on overwhelming and continuous heavy shelling, at a level of bombardment designed not just to suppress the defenders, but to physically demolish their fortifications. Tanks were brought up to point-blank range, firing directly into the terminal structures and systematically punching holes in the walls. In a final decisive act, sappers managed to plant massive quantities of explosives in the foundations of the new terminal building, aiming to bring the entire structure down upon the heads of its last defenders. On January 20, 2015, the charges were detonated. A catastrophic explosion ripped through the building, causing a major section of the new terminal to collapse entirely. Dozens of Ukrainian soldiers were buried alive under tons of concrete and twisted steel. But even in the face of this ultimate devastation, the surviving groups, scattered and isolated amidst the ruins, continued to resist. Following the foundation explosion, the Donetsk Airport complex was no longer a viable defensive position. The organized defense effectively ceased to exist. The last remaining fortifications had been obliterated. Communication systems were severed, and the crucial observation posts from which the defenders had directed their fire were gone. Between January 21st and January 22nd, 2015, the last surviving Ukrainian soldiers, many of them wounded, conducted a fighting withdrawal from the area, abandoning the skeletal ruins they had defended for so long. The 242-day siege had officially ended. The true human cost of the battle has never been fully and officially disclosed by either side. However, credible estimates suggest that hundreds of Ukrainian soldiers were killed or wounded during the siege. Attacking forces also sustained heavy losses in both personnel and equipment during their repeated, costly assaults on the fortified position. From a purely military perspective, the outcome was one of mutual destruction. The airport was rendered completely unusable, a field of debris with no tactical or operational value. Neither side could claim to have gained anything tangible from the smoldering wreckage. Psychologically, however, the impact was profound. For Ukraine, the defenders, the Cyborgs, became a living legend, an enduring national symbol of courage and unbreakable resistance against overwhelming odds. The ruins of Donetsk Airport were transformed into a modern-day Thermopylae, a testament to absolute defiance in the face of aggression. In a final strategic assessment, the question of the battle's necessity remains a subject of debate among military analysts. From a purely operational standpoint, holding the airport did not decisively alter the overall strategic map of the war in Donbass. The front lines eventually stabilized elsewhere. However, when viewed through the lens of morale, politics, and national symbolism, the defense of the airport achieved exactly what Ukraine needed at a critical juncture. It galvanized a nation, created a powerful modern mythos, and demonstrated to the world Ukraine's will to resist. Conversely, the attacking side paid an exorbitant price in blood and resources, only to ultimately occupy a pile of rubble. This raises a final lingering question. If Donetsk Airport had fallen sooner, would the trajectory of the war in Donbass have unfolded differently? Or was it precisely this desperate 242-day stand that laid the psychological foundation for the resilience Ukraine would demonstrate for years to come? The concrete and steel of the Donetsk Airport were destroyed, but the story forged in its ruins never ends.